Rich female lawyer sees a young girl on the streets holding a flower bouquet and wearing her ex-boyfriend's necklace. She held her arm and said something unexpected. Amelia's steps were confident and purposeful as she moved through the city's busy streets, her high heels clicking rhythmically against the pavement. She had just left an intense meeting at her firm, one that had left her mentally drained but professionally satisfied. The evening air was crisp, a welcome relief from the stuffy conference room where she had spent the last several hours. The city was alive around her, people hurrying home, street vendors calling out to passers-by, the distant hum of traffic blending with the occasional honking of horns. Yet despite the noise, Amelia's mind wandered back to a simpler time, a time when her life wasn't dominated by court cases and deadlines. As she turned a corner, something caught her eye, a flash of silver against the twilight. There, sitting on the cold, hard ground, was a young girl, her head bowed as she arranged a small bouquet of wildflowers in her lap. The girl's clothes were tattered, her hair a tangled mess. But it wasn't her appearance that had captured Amelia's attention. It was the necklace around her neck, a delicate chain that held a single, intricately designed pendant, a pendant Amelia knew all too well. Her breath caught in her throat as she recognized the piece of jewelry. It was the necklace she had given to Daniel, a man she hadn't thought about in years. Or at least, that's what she had told herself. A flood of memories washed over her, threatening to knock her off balance. The late-night conversations, the stolen moments of joy amidst the chaos of their lives, and finally, the painful end to it all. She had crafted that necklace herself, a symbol of what she believed would be a love that could withstand anything. Yet here it was, hanging around the neck of a child who couldn't possibly understand its significance. Amelia's mind raced as she tried to make sense of what she was seeing. How had the necklace ended up here, with this girl? And what did it mean for Daniel? Was he even still in the city? Had he fallen so far? Driven by an urge she couldn't quite explain, Amelia walked over to the girl, her heart pounding in her chest. She crouched down to the child's level, her gaze fixed on the pendant that swung slightly with the girl's every movement. "Where did you get this necklace?" Amelia's voice was soft, but there was an urgency beneath the surface that she couldn't hide. The girl looked up, her wide eyes filled with a mixture of fear and surprise. For a moment she didn't speak, her small hands clutching the necklace as if it were a lifeline. Amelia waited, her pulse quickening in the silence that stretched between them. Finally, the girl's lips parted, and she spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. "A man gave it to me," she said, her eyes flickering with uncertainty. "He said it would bring me luck." The words hung in the air, filling Amelia with a mixture of dread and curiosity. Who was this man? And why had he given away something so precious, so personal? Amelia's mind raced as she considered the possibilities. She had been so sure that she had left Daniel and everything associated with him behind. But now it seemed that the past had a way of finding her, no matter how far she tried to run. Amelia tightened her grip on the girl's arm, her own emotions threatening to spill over. "Do you know this man?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. The girl shook her head, her expression turning guarded. "No," she replied, her voice barely audible. "He just gave it to me. Then he left." Amelia's heart ached as she looked into the girl's eyes. There was something familiar there, something that tugged at her memory, though she couldn't quite place it. She needed to know more about the necklace, about the man who had given it to this girl, and about what had happened to Daniel. For a moment, Amelia considered walking away. This was a part of her life she had buried long ago, a wound she had never fully healed from. But something deep inside her refused to let go. She had to find out the truth, no matter how painful it might be. Amelia took a deep breath, forcing herself to focus. "What's your name?" she asked, her tone softening. The girl hesitated before answering, her voice barely more than a murmur. "Lily?" she said, looking down at the flowers in her lap. Amelia's heart skipped a beat as she realized she was now entangled in something far more complicated than she had anticipated. As the city continued to move around them, oblivious to the quiet drama unfolding on its streets, Amelia made a decision. She wasn't going to let this go. Not now, not when she was so close to uncovering the truth. "Lily," she repeated, her voice gentle but firm. "Can you take me to the man who gave you this necklace?" The girl looked up at her, eyes wide with uncertainty. Amelia could see the hesitation in her expression, but she also saw something else: trust. Slowly, Lily nodded, and Amelia felt a strange sense of relief wash over her. Whatever lay ahead, she knew she couldn't turn back now. As Amelia and Lily made their way through the city streets, the air grew colder, the sun dipping lower behind the skyline. The once bustling sidewalks were now quieter, the chatter of pedestrians replaced by the distant rumble of traffic and the occasional murmur of voices from open doorways. Amelia walked slightly ahead, her mind racing with a mixture of anticipation and dread. She couldn't shake the image of Daniel that Lily had painted. Tall, lean, with a worn expression that spoke of hardships unimaginable to her. The Daniel she knew had always been full of life, his sharp wit and infectious energy, a stark contrast to the broken man Lily described. Lily, clutching her small bouquet, kept pace beside Amelia, her eyes darting around nervously as they approached the alley. The young girl had been hesitant to bring Amelia here, her trust earned only through the lawyer's gentle persistence. "It's just over there," Lily whispered, pointing to a narrow, shadowed alley between two old brick buildings. Amelia's heart skipped a beat as she peered into the darkness, her breath catching at the thought of what or who might be waiting inside. The alley was narrow and littered with debris, the kind of place people passed by without a second thought. Yet to Amelia, it now held the weight of a lifetime of questions. "Are you sure this is where you see him?" Amelia asked, her voice soft but edged with urgency. Lily nodded, her expression serious. "He's here most nights," she said, her small voice echoing slightly in the confined space. "Sometimes he just sits and looks at the ground. Other times he talks to himself, like he's trying to figure something out." The description sent a shiver down Amelia's spine. It was hard to reconcile this image with the man she had once known, the man who had been so full of plans and dreams. But the more she listened to Lily, the more she realized that she couldn't dismiss the possibility that this man could indeed be Daniel. As they stepped deeper into the alley, Amelia's eyes adjusted to the dim light, picking out details she hadn't noticed before. There were a few tattered blankets piled in a corner, along with a collection of empty cans and bottles, all suggesting that someone had been living here. Amelia's chest tightened as she imagined Daniel, alone and vulnerable in such a place. She had known he was proud, sometimes too proud, and the thought of him reduced to this, living in the shadows, stripped of everything he had worked so hard to achieve, was almost too much to bear. Lily's hand tugged at Amelia's sleeve, pulling her from her thoughts. "Sometimes he leaves things here," Lily said, her voice barely above a whisper as she pointed to a small makeshift table nestled against the wall. Amelia moved closer, her curiosity piqued. On the table, she saw a few worn-out notebooks, a pen, and a photograph, its edges curled from the damp. She picked up the photo, her breath catching as she recognized the faces staring back at her. Herself and Daniel, smiling, in a moment that felt like it belonged to another lifetime. The photo was faded, but the emotions it stirred were still raw and powerful. Amelia's hands trembled as she placed the photograph back on the table, her mind reeling. This was more than just a coincidence. This was a connection, a thread tying her present to a past she thought was long buried. She turned to Lily, her voice steady but laced with emotion. "Has he ever talked about where he's from or why he's here?" she asked, desperate for any information that could lead her to the truth. Lily shook her head slowly. "No, he doesn't say much about himself. Just that he's sorry and that he hopes things will get better someday." Amelia's heart ached at the thought of Daniel carrying such guilt, such regret, alone. The man she had known was never one to dwell on the past, always looking forward, always chasing the next challenge. But now, it seemed, he had been crushed by the weight of something beyond his control. The realization that Daniel might have been framed, that he had lost everything due to forces beyond his control, began to take root in her mind. The urge to find him, to help him, grew stronger with each passing moment, even as fear gnawed at the edges of her resolve. As the evening shadows deepened around them, Amelia knew that this was only the beginning. The emptiness of the alley, the scattered remnants of a life left behind, all pointed to a story far more complex than she had imagined. She was standing on the edge of something profound, something that could change everything she thought she knew about Daniel, and perhaps about herself. "Lily," Amelia said, her voice filled with a quiet determination, "I need you to stay with me. We're going to find him, and we're going to figure out what happened." The young girl nodded, her trust in Amelia evident in the way she clung to her side. Together, they turned back towards the street, the search for Daniel, now a mission Amelia knew she couldn't abandon. The next morning, Amelia sat in her sleek office, the sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across her immaculate desk. Despite the usual chaos of her workday, her mind was somewhere else entirely. The image of the necklace around Lily's neck and the story of the man who had given it to her haunted her thoughts. Unable to focus, she found herself staring at her computer screen, the cursor blinking on a blank document as if mocking her inability to concentrate. She knew what she had to do, even though every rational part of her mind screamed against it. After years of trying to bury her past, Amelia realized she needed to uncover it again, starting with Daniel. Taking a deep breath, Amelia steeled herself and opened the legal databases she usually reserved for her cases. It didn't take long for her to find what she was looking for. The public records on Daniel were sparse, but the scandal that had engulfed him was splashed across the headlines of old news articles. Amelia's heart sank as she read through the reports, each one more damning than the last. Accusations of financial misconduct, embezzlement, and betrayal. The words felt like a knife twisting in her gut, but what troubled her the most was how out of character it all seemed. This wasn't the Daniel she knew, the man who had been so dedicated to his career, so passionate about doing the right thing. None of it made sense. As Amelia delved deeper, she found more inconsistencies. The accusations had come out of nowhere, with little concrete evidence to back them up. Most of the case against Daniel relied on hearsay and circumstantial evidence. The company he had once led with such confidence had turned on him almost overnight. And the more Amelia read, the more she suspected foul play. It was as if someone had orchestrated the whole thing, pulling strings behind the scenes to bring Daniel down. Her legal instincts kicked in, and she began to piece together the puzzle. But every new discovery only raised more questions. Who would want to destroy Daniel, and why? The thought that Daniel might have been framed gnawed at her. She remembered the integrity with which he had approached everything in life, from his work to their relationship. The Daniel she knew would never have been involved in anything illegal, let alone something that would destroy his life so completely. The more she thought about it, the more determined she became to get to the bottom of it all. But there was another, more personal reason driving her forward, a guilt she had never fully shaken. When their relationship ended, Amelia had shut herself off, refusing to reach out or offer any kind of support, even when she knew he was struggling. Now, it seemed, she might have the chance to make things right. With a renewed sense of purpose, Amelia leaned back in her chair, her fingers steepled as she considered her next move. Finding Daniel wasn't going to be easy. He had vanished without a trace after the scandal broke, and there were no recent records of him anywhere. No bank activity, no property transactions, nothing. It was as if he had simply disappeared. But Amelia was nothing if not resourceful. She knew people who could help her track him down, and she wasn't afraid to use every tool at her disposal. For the first time in years, she felt a glimmer of hope, mingled with a deep sense of responsibility. She had the power to help him, and this time, she wasn't going to walk away. As she began making calls, contacting private investigators, and digging through every possible lead, Amelia couldn't help but feel a strange mix of emotions. There was the fear of what she might find, of reopening old wounds that had never fully healed. But there was also a growing resolve, a belief that perhaps, just perhaps, this was something she was meant to do. The hours slipped by as she worked, her focus sharpening with every new piece of information she uncovered. It wasn't much, but she started to form a clearer picture of the last days before Daniel's disappearance, his increasing isolation, the mysterious withdrawals from his accounts, the way his life had unraveled so quickly. By the time the sun had begun to set, casting a golden glow across the city skyline, Amelia had reached a conclusion. She needed to find Daniel, not just for his sake, but for her own. There were too many unanswered questions, too many loose ends that needed tying up. And if Daniel was indeed innocent, as her gut told her he was, then she had to be the one to prove it. She owed him that much. As she gathered her things to leave the office, Amelia glanced at the photograph she had found in the alley, now resting on her desk, a silent reminder of what she had lost. It was time to confront the past, no matter how painful, and find the truth that had been hidden for so long. Amelia's days quickly filled with the demanding task of unraveling the conspiracy that had ensnared Daniel. Her once orderly routine now revolved around interviewing Daniel's former colleagues, tracing leads that had gone cold, and meticulously dissecting the evidence that had been used to destroy his reputation. Each conversation added another piece to the puzzle, a puzzle that revealed just how deep the betrayal ran. Amelia's determination grew with every discovery, but so did her frustration. The more she uncovered, the more she realized how carefully orchestrated the plot against Daniel had been. The layers of deceit were thick, the players involved powerful, and it was clear that they had gone to great lengths to bury the truth. The interviews were the most challenging part. Amelia had always prided herself on being able to read people, to sense when they were hiding something. But in this case, she encountered walls of silence and fear. Former colleagues who had once respected Daniel now spoke of him in hushed tones, their eyes flickering with unease. It was as if they were afraid of being associated with him, even after all these years. Some denied knowing anything at all, while others offered vague statements that did little to shed light on the situation. But Amelia was relentless. She pressed on, asking pointed questions, digging deeper until cracks began to appear in their stories. One of the most revealing moments came when she tracked down a former accountant who had worked closely with Daniel. The man was nervous, his hands shaking as he offered her coffee in his modest kitchen. "I didn't want to believe it, you know," he confessed, his voice trembling. "Daniel was always so honest. It didn't make sense. But when the pressure came down, people started changing their tunes." Amelia leaned forward, her heart pounding as she sensed a breakthrough. "What kind of pressure?" she asked, her tone gentle but insistent. The accountant hesitated, glancing at the door as if expecting someone to burst in at any moment. "They told us to cooperate or face consequences. I didn't know what to do. I have a family." Amelia's suspicion deepened as she followed this lead. The further she went, the more she realized that key witnesses had been coerced into giving false testimonies. She uncovered records of large, unexplained deposits in the accounts of those who had testified against Daniel, clear evidence of bribery. The most damning piece of the puzzle was the testimony of Daniel's own business partner, a man who had vanished soon after the scandal broke. Amelia managed to trace his last known location to a remote villa in South America, where he had been living under a different name. The pieces were finally coming together. Daniel had been framed, and the truth had been buried under layers of deception. With this new information, Amelia knew she had to move quickly. She gathered everything she had uncovered, witness statements, financial records, and the trail leading to the missing business partner, and compiled it into a comprehensive dossier. The weight of the evidence was undeniable, but it wasn't enough to exonerate Daniel on its own. She needed a plan, and for that, she turned to the one person she trusted implicitly, her mentor, Judge Whitman. Retired but still sharp and influential, Judge Whitman listened intently as Amelia laid out her findings. His brow furrowed as he flipped through the pages of the dossier, his expression growing darker with each new revelation. "This is serious, Amelia," he said finally, his voice grave. "If what you're saying is true, this goes far beyond Daniel's case. We're looking at a major conspiracy, possibly involving some very powerful people." Amelia nodded, her resolve firm. "I know. That's why I need your help. We have to reopen the case, expose what really happened. But we can't do it without Daniel. He's the key to all of this." The judge sighed, leaning back in his chair. "Finding him won't be easy. If he's been living on the streets, he could be anywhere by now. But if anyone can bring him back, it's you. Just be careful, Amelia. You're dealing with dangerous people." Amelia felt a chill run down her spine at his words, but she didn't let it deter her. She knew she was up against formidable opponents, but the thought of Daniel suffering alone, bearing the weight of a crime he didn't commit, was more than she could bear. She redoubled her efforts, hiring private investigators, reaching out to contacts in law enforcement, and even retracing her steps to the alley where Lily had first told her about the mysterious man. But Daniel remained elusive, like a ghost haunting the fringes of the city. The search was exhausting, both physically and emotionally, but Amelia refused to give up. She knew that finding Daniel was the only way to bring justice, not just for him, but for everyone who had been wronged. Days turned into weeks as Amelia pushed herself to the brink, driven by a mix of guilt, determination, and something she couldn't quite name, something that felt dangerously close to hope. She knew the clock was ticking, that every day Daniel spent in hiding was another day the truth remained buried. But she also knew that she was getting closer. The more she dug, the more she sensed that Daniel wasn't as far away as he seemed. He was out there, somewhere, waiting to be found. And when she did find him, Amelia vowed she would not only clear his name, but also make amends for the choices that had driven them apart so many years ago. Amelia's nights had become a routine of restless waiting, her thoughts consumed by the search for Daniel. The alley where Lily had first described seeing him had become a second home to her. Its cold, dark corners, a stark contrast to the warmth and comfort she was used to. She would arrive every evening, her breath visible in the cool night air, eyes scanning the shadows for any sign of the man she once loved. The city seemed quieter in those moments, the usual hustle and bustle reduced to distant echoes, leaving her alone with her thoughts. Each passing night without a glimpse of him deepened the ache in her heart, but she refused to give up, driven by the belief that Daniel was still out there, somewhere in the darkness. Finally, one evening, as the sky turned a deep indigo and the first stars began to appear, Amelia's patience was rewarded. She stood in the familiar alley, her breath catching as she noticed a figure emerging from the shadows. The man's steps were slow and unsteady, his head bowed as if the weight of the world rested on his shoulders. Amelia's heart pounded in her chest as she watched him approach, her mind reeling with both anticipation and fear. As he came closer, the dim light revealed more details. A gaunt face, clothes that hung loosely on his frame, and eyes that seemed haunted by memories of a better time. It was Daniel, but he was almost a shadow of the man she remembered, his once vibrant presence now dulled by years of hardship. "Daniel?" Amelia's voice trembled as she called out to him, her words barely more than a whisper. The man stopped in his tracks, his body tensing as if he had been caught in a dream. Slowly he turned to face her, his eyes narrowing in confusion before widening in recognition. The years had etched lines into his face, but the deep blue of his eyes, the same eyes she had once lost herself in, remained unchanged. For a moment, neither of them spoke, the air between them thick with unspoken emotions. Amelia could see the shock in his gaze, quickly followed by shame as he realized who was standing before him. But then, just as quickly, Something else flickered in his eyes, something that resembled hope, fragile and tentative. "Amelia?" Daniel's voice was hoarse, as if he hadn't spoken to anyone in a long time. He took a hesitant step forward, his expression a mix of disbelief and vulnerability. Amelia felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes as she nodded, her own emotions threatening to overwhelm her. "Yes, it's me," she replied, her voice breaking slightly. "I've been looking for you, Daniel. I've been searching everywhere." Her words seemed to break through the barrier that had held him back, and Daniel's shoulders slumped as if the weight he had been carrying had finally become too much. The distance between them, once so vast, now seemed to vanish as they stood there, facing each other after so many years apart. Amelia took a step closer, her hand reaching out instinctively. Daniel flinched at first, as if afraid to believe this was real, but when she gently touched his arm, he didn't pull away. "Why, Amelia?" he asked, his voice thick with emotion. "Why did you come back, after all this time?" Amelia swallowed hard, trying to find the right words. "I never stopped caring about you, Daniel," she said, her voice firm despite the tears that threatened to fall. "When I saw that necklace on Lily, I knew something was wrong. I couldn't just turn my back on you, not again." Daniel's eyes searched hers, looking for answers, for reassurance that this wasn't just another cruel twist of fate. Amelia could see the pain etched into his features, the exhaustion that came from years of fighting a battle he hadn't chosen. For a long moment, they stood in silence, the night air cool against their skin. Amelia could feel the years of separation and heartache pressing down on them, but also the possibility of something new, something that could heal the wounds of the past. "I've found out what happened, Daniel," she said finally, her voice steady. "I know you were set up. I've been gathering evidence, trying to put the pieces together. But I need you, Daniel. I need you to help me finish this." Daniel's gaze dropped to the ground, his shoulders sagging under the weight of her words. "I don't know if I have anything left to give, Amelia," he murmured, his voice laced with despair. "They took everything from me. I don't even recognize myself anymore." Amelia's heart ached at his words, but she refused to let go of the hope that had brought her this far. She tightened her grip on his arm, her voice filled with quiet determination. "Then let me help you find yourself again," she said. "We'll do it together, Daniel. We'll clear your name and rebuild what they tried to destroy. But I can't do it without you." Daniel looked up at her, his eyes reflecting a mixture of fear and longing. For a moment, it seemed as if he might retreat back into the shadows, but then something shifted in his expression. Something that told Amelia the man she once knew was still there, buried beneath the years of suffering. "Okay," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "I'll try. For you, Amelia." The words hung in the air between them, fragile but filled with a sense of promise. Amelia felt a surge of relief mixed with the daunting realization that this was just the beginning. They had found each other again, but the road ahead was still fraught with challenges. Together, they would have to confront the past, face the forces that had conspired against them, and fight for the truth. But for the first time in years, Amelia felt a spark of hope. It was faint, like a candle flickering in the wind, but it was there, lighting the way forward. She squeezed Daniel's hands gently, offering him a small, reassuring smile. "We'll figure this out," she said softly, "one step at a time." As the days passed, Daniel and Amelia began to rediscover a rhythm together, their connection tentatively growing stronger. In the midst of this, Lily became a central figure in their lives, her presence weaving them closer in unexpected ways. Daniel recounted how he had first met Lily, his voice filled with a mix of sorrow and affection. It had been one of those gray, overcast days when the city seemed to blend into the sky, everything draped in a somber, muted light. He had been wandering the streets aimlessly, lost in his own despair, when he spotted Lily sitting alone on the curb, her small figure hunched against the cold. There had been something about her, a quiet strength, a resilience that reminded him of a younger version of himself, before life had taken so much from him. He couldn't explain it, but from that moment, he felt an unspoken connection to her, as if their paths had crossed for a reason. Daniel had started visiting her regularly, bringing her small gifts, an apple, a sandwich, whatever he could scrounge up, and eventually he had given her the necklace. "It was all I had left of a life I'd lost," he said quietly, his eyes distant. "I thought maybe it could protect her, give her the luck I never had." Amelia listened intently, her heart aching for both Daniel and Lily, realizing how deeply they had impacted each other's lives. Amelia's bond with Lily grew as she spent more time with the girl. The first time Amelia saw Lily's bright smile, it was like a burst of sunshine breaking through the clouds of her own turmoil. Despite everything Lily had been through, abandoned by her mother, forced to fend for herself on the unforgiving streets, she remained remarkably kind and hopeful. It was these qualities that drew Amelia in, and she found herself admiring the young girl's spirit. Every interaction with Lily felt like a small step toward mending the fractures in Amelia's own heart. She couldn't help but see a reflection of her younger self in Lily, someone who had faced the world alone, only to come out stronger on the other side. One afternoon, as they sat together in a small park not far from the alley where Lily usually stayed, Amelia gently asked Lily about her past. The girl's eyes darkened slightly, but she didn't shy away from the questions. "My mom left when I was really little," Lily said, her voice steady but tinged with sadness. "I don't remember much about her, just that she always seemed tired. After she left, I tried to find her, but, well, I guess she didn't want to be found." Amelia felt a pang of empathy, reaching out to squeeze Lily's hand. "You're not alone anymore, Lily," she said softly. "We're here for you now." The words hung in the air, a promise of the bond that was slowly but surely forming between the three of them. As the days turned into weeks, Amelia began taking concrete steps to improve Lily's life. She found a temporary shelter where Lily could stay, ensuring she had access to food, warm clothing, and a safe place to sleep at night. The process wasn't easy. Lily had grown accustomed to her independence, and trusting others didn't come naturally to her. But Amelia's persistence, coupled with Daniel's quiet support, began to wear down the walls Lily had built around herself. The girl's resilience, tempered by the hardships she had faced, became a source of strength for all of them. Amelia could see how Daniel's mood lifted whenever he was around Lily, how her laughter seemed to ease the burdens he carried. For Amelia, helping Lily and reconnecting with Daniel wasn't just about them, it was about her own healing as well. She hadn't realized how empty her life had become, how much she had buried her own emotions under layers of professional success and control. But in caring for Lily, in working alongside Daniel to rebuild their lives, Amelia felt a sense of purpose she hadn't known she was missing. Each small victory, whether it was seeing Lily smile after a hot meal or hearing Daniel talk about the future without the weight of despair in his voice, brought her a little closer to the woman she used to be before everything had fallen apart. The three of them began to settle into a new routine, one that, while far from perfect, offered a glimmer of hope for the future. They spent more time together, their interactions marked by a growing sense of trust and mutual care. Lily's presence was like a bridge, connecting Amelia and Daniel in ways they hadn't anticipated. There was still so much left unsaid between them, so many wounds that hadn't yet healed, but for the first time in years, Amelia felt like they were on the right path. They were building something together, something fragile yet full of potential, a chance for redemption, for forgiveness, and perhaps for a new beginning. Amelia dove headfirst into reopening Daniel's case, her determination fueling long days and even longer nights. The conference room at her law firm became the command center for the battle ahead. Papers strewn across tables, whiteboards filled with timelines and connections that formed a web of deceit. Her team of lawyers and investigators was small but fiercely dedicated, each one chosen for their integrity and commitment to justice. They pored over old evidence, scrutinized every detail, and followed up on leads that had been dismissed or overlooked. As the case unfolded, it became clear that they were up against a powerful network of individuals who had everything to lose if the truth were revealed. The deeper they dug, the more disturbing the revelations became. Evidence that had been conveniently lost during the initial investigation was suddenly uncovered, pointing to a coordinated effort to frame Daniel. Witnesses who had testified against him began to change their stories under pressure, revealing that they had been coerced or bribed into lying. Amelia's team uncovered financial records showing large sums of money transferred to key players just before they provided damning testimony. It was a web of corruption that extended far beyond what Amelia had initially imagined, and she knew they were facing an uphill battle. But for every piece of evidence they unearthed, the case against Daniel weakened, and their resolve grew stronger. Amelia's old friend Rachel, a high-profile investigative journalist, soon entered the picture. They had lost touch after law school, but Rachel had always respected Amelia's work and tenacity. When she caught wind of the case, Rachel reached out, offering her skills and connections to help bring the conspiracy into the public eye. Over coffee in a small, tucked-away cafe, Amelia and Rachel discussed the strategy for exposing the truth. Rachel's involvement would not only add public pressure, but also protect Amelia and her team from behind-the-scenes threats. The media coverage Rachel promised could shine a spotlight on the corruption, making it harder for those involved to operate in the shadows. The public scrutiny had an immediate impact. Once the story hit the headlines, the case became a lightning rod for public opinion. Rachel's investigative reports were sharp and unrelenting, connecting dots that the public hadn't seen before. The narrative began to shift, with people questioning the original case against Daniel and the integrity of those who had brought it forward. The individuals who had framed Daniel started to feel the heat, their once solid defenses beginning to crumble under the weight of growing suspicion and new evidence. Panic set in among those who had orchestrated the conspiracy, and Amelia knew this was their chance to strike harder, to press for the truth to finally come to light. Despite the momentum, the legal battle was far from over. The opposition was ruthless, hiring top-tier defense lawyers to discredit Amelia's team and dismiss the new evidence as circumstantial or irrelevant. Threats, both subtle and overt, began to surface. Anonymous phone calls, veiled warnings, even attempts to intimidate key witnesses into silence. But Amelia's team was prepared. They tightened security around themselves and their witnesses, ensuring that no stone was left unturned and no person left unprotected. Every day felt like a battle, each victory small but significant, a step closer to justice. Through it all, Daniel remained a constant presence, no longer the broken man Amelia had found in the alley, but someone with renewed purpose. He spent hours with Amelia, going over the case, discussing strategy, and preparing himself for the trial. The trust between them, once shattered, was slowly being rebuilt, forged anew in the fires of their shared fight. For Daniel, the legal battle was more than just clearing his name. It was about reclaiming his life, his dignity, and his future. He knew the odds were still against them, but for the first time in years, he felt a glimmer of hope, a belief that the truth could prevail. As the trial date approached, the tension in the air was palpable. Amelia and her team worked tirelessly, knowing that every detail, every argument could make the difference between victory and defeat. The courtroom would be a battleground, with both sides bringing everything they had. But for Amelia, this was more than just another case. It was a fight for justice, for redemption, and for the love that she and Daniel had once shared. The stakes were higher than ever, but so was her determination. She knew they were about to enter the most challenging phase of their journey, but with new allies and a growing sense of hope, they were ready to face whatever came next. The trial's final days felt like a pressure cooker about to burst, the tension in the courtroom thick enough to cut with a knife. Every seat was filled, spectators and reporters alike hanging on every word, every piece of evidence. Amelia had never felt such a mixture of anxiety and determination. She knew this was their one shot to clear Daniel's name and bring justice to the surface. Her team, exhausted but relentless, had laid out a case that left little room for doubt. Witnesses who had once been silenced by fear now stood bravely, recounting the threats and bribes they had faced. The new evidence they presented painted a damning picture of the conspiracy that had entangled Daniel, revealing a network of corruption that reached far beyond his initial trial. Amelia's closing argument was a masterclass in advocacy, delivered with a quiet but unyielding passion that captured the jury's attention. She spoke not just as a lawyer, but as someone deeply connected to the case, weaving a narrative that portrayed Daniel as a man of integrity who had been betrayed by those closest to him. "The evidence you've seen," she said, her voice steady despite the emotion beneath it, "is not just a list of facts, but a story of how power and greed can destroy lives. Daniel was not just a scapegoat, he was a victim. And now you have the power to right that wrong." Her words hung in the air, the weight of them settling over the room as she took her seat, her heart pounding in her chest. The prosecution did their best to counter, but the cracks in their case were too large to ignore. Their attempts to discredit the new witnesses fell flat, and their arguments seemed weak against the overwhelming evidence of manipulation and deceit. Amelia could see the uncertainty in the faces of the jurors, the way they exchanged glances when the prosecution tried to downplay the corruption at the heart of the case. It was clear that the tide had turned in Daniel's favor, but until the verdict was read, Amelia knew nothing was certain. The hours that followed were some of the longest of her life, each tick of the clock echoing like a drumbeat in her ears. Daniel sat beside her, his hand gripping hers tightly under the table, a silent reminder of the bond that had grown between them throughout this ordeal. They had been through so much together, years of pain and separation, the agony of reliving the past, and the hope that had slowly rekindled in both of them. As they waited for the jury to return, the two exchanged a glance that spoke volumes, a shared understanding that whatever happened next, they would face it side by side. The courtroom was a world unto itself, the outside reality fading away as they focused solely on the impending decision. When the jury finally returned, the air in the courtroom seemed to still, every breath held in anticipation. The foreman stood clearing his throat before speaking the words that would change everything. "We, the jury, find the defendant not guilty on all charges." The words echoed in Amelia's ears, a moment of disbelief before the reality set in. Relief crashed over her like a wave, and she felt Daniel's grip on her hand tighten as he let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for years. Around them, the courtroom erupted, some in cheers, others in stunned silence. But all Amelia could hear was the sound of her own heart beating, the realization that they had won, that justice had prevailed. Tears welled up in Amelia's eyes as she turned to Daniel, seeing the emotion on his face mirrored in her own. For a moment, they just looked at each other, the weight of everything they had been through settling between them. Then, without a word, Daniel pulled her into a tight embrace, the relief and gratitude pouring out of him. "Thank you," he whispered into her ear, his voice choked with emotion. "Thank you for believing in me, for fighting for me." Amelia held him close, feeling the warmth of his presence, the solidity of him, and knew that whatever came next, they would face it together. As the chaos of the courtroom swirled around them, Amelia knew this was only the beginning. Clearing Daniel's name was a victory, but it wouldn't erase the years of hardship he had endured or the scars left behind. There would be challenges ahead, new battles to fight, both in court and in their personal lives. But for the first time in a long while, they had hope, a chance to rebuild, to reclaim the lives that had been stolen from them. Amelia looked up at Daniel, a small smile playing on her lips. "This is our second chance," she said softly. "Let's make the most of it." Outside the courthouse, the sun was beginning to set, casting a golden glow over the city. As they stepped into the evening light, Daniel took a deep breath, the weight of the past finally lifting off his shoulders. Amelia stood beside him, feeling the warmth of his hand in hers, and for the first time in years, she allowed herself to imagine a future where they could be together, where the pain of the past could finally give way to the possibility of something new. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but as they walked forward into the dusk, they did so with a sense of purpose, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, together. The atmosphere in Amelia's apartment was warm and comforting, the soft glow of lamps casting a cozy light over the room. After the intense weeks of the trial, it felt like a refuge, a place where they could finally breathe again. Lily sat curled up on the couch, her small hands clutching a cup of hot chocolate that Amelia had made for her. The girl had been a source of quiet strength throughout the trial, her resilience and optimism shining through even during the most challenging moments. But tonight, there was a different air about her, a hesitance, a nervous energy that Amelia hadn't seen before. Amelia noticed it immediately, the way Lily's eyes darted around the room as if searching for the right words. Sensing that something was on the girl's mind, she sat down beside her, offering a reassuring smile. "Lily, if there's something you want to talk about, you can tell me," Amelia said gently, her voice filled with concern. Lily hesitated, biting her lip as she looked down at her cup. There was a long pause, the silence heavy with anticipation. Finally, Lily spoke, her voice trembling slightly. "There's something I need to tell you about the man who gave me the necklace." Amelia's heart skipped a beat, her attention sharpening at the mention of the necklace, the piece of jewelry that had set everything in motion. She nodded encouragingly, urging Lily to continue. "He's not just some man," Lily said, her eyes lifting to meet Amelia's. "He's my father." The words hit Amelia like a tidal wave, the impact immediate and overwhelming. Her breath caught in her throat as she processed what Lily had just revealed. Daniel was Lily's father. The idea seemed impossible, and yet as she looked at Lily's earnest face, she knew the girl was telling the truth. A flurry of emotions surged through her, shock, confusion, and a deep sadness for the years that had been lost between them. The realization sent Amelia reeling, her mind spinning with questions. Why hadn't Daniel ever mentioned having a child? Had he even known? The thought of Daniel living all these years unaware that he had a daughter was heartbreaking, and it left Amelia feeling both angry and sorrowful. "Lily," Amelia began, her voice soft, "does Daniel know that you're his daughter?" Lily shook her head, her expression filled with a mixture of fear and hope. "I don't think so. My mom never told me much about him, just that he was gone before I was born. She left me when I was really little, and I've been on my own ever since." The pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place, each one more startling than the last. Amelia could hardly believe that this secret had been hidden for so long, and the thought of confronting Daniel with the truth was daunting. But it had to be done. With a deep breath, Amelia turned to Lily, her heart aching for the young girl who had endured so much. "Thank you for telling me, Lily," she said, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. "We need to talk to Daniel about this. He deserves to know the truth." Lily nodded, her trust in Amelia evident in her wide, hopeful eyes. That night, when Amelia finally told Daniel what Lily had revealed, his reaction was exactly what she had feared. The shock was immediate, his face draining of color as he struggled to comprehend the words. "She's my daughter?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. He sank into the nearest chair, his hands trembling as they gripped the armrests. Amelia watched as the realization sank in, seeing the pain and confusion in his eyes. "I never knew," he said, his voice breaking. "I had no idea. How could I not know?" The anguish in his voice was palpable, the weight of the years lost between them pressing down on him like a ton of bricks. Amelia knelt beside him, placing a comforting hand on his arm. "Daniel, it's not your fault," she said softly, her heart breaking for him. "You didn't know, but now that you do, we can figure this out together." Daniel's eyes met hers, filled with a mixture of sorrow and determination. "I need to make this right," he said, his voice filled with resolve. "I need to be there for her, but I don't even know where to start." The uncertainty in his voice was clear, but so was the deep sense of responsibility he felt. This revelation had shaken him to his core, but it had also given him a renewed purpose, a chance to finally be the father Lily had never had. The road ahead was uncertain, filled with questions they didn't yet have answers to. They had no idea how Lily's mother might react if she ever resurfaced, or what legal implications might arise from Daniel's past. But one thing was clear: their lives were more intertwined than they had ever imagined. As they sat together, trying to piece together the fragments of this new reality, Amelia realized that this was just the beginning of a new chapter in their journey. A chapter that would require all the strength, courage, and love they could muster. The weeks that followed were filled with a blend of challenges and heartwarming moments, as Daniel, Amelia, and Lily began to forge their new life together. The once stark and empty spaces in Daniel's life were now filled with the sounds of laughter and the gentle hum of daily routines. Mornings started with the clatter of dishes as they prepared breakfast together, a simple act that quickly became a cherished ritual. Daniel, who had once drifted aimlessly through his days, found purpose in the little things, helping Lily with her schoolwork, cooking meals, and building a home where love and security reigned. Amelia, too, underwent a transformation. The independent woman who had once thrived on solitude now found herself immersed in the intricacies of family life. She reveled in the warmth of their growing bond, each day revealing new layers of her capacity to care and connect. The wall she had built around her heart, once so carefully constructed to protect herself from pain, began to crumble. The moments spent with Lily, reading bedtime stories, or simply talking about the day, became the highlights of her evenings. With Daniel by her side, she discovered a deeper sense of fulfillment than her career had ever provided. For Lily, the transition from life on the streets to the safety of a home was overwhelming at first. But with Amelia and Daniel's patient guidance, she slowly began to trust in the stability they offered. Her room, decorated with soft colors and filled with books and toys, became a sanctuary where she could finally be a child again. She blossomed under their care, her once guarded nature giving way to the joyful spirit that had been hidden beneath years of hardship. Watching her flourish brought Amelia and Daniel closer, their shared love for Lily binding them in ways they hadn't anticipated. As the seasons changed, so did their relationship. The awkwardness of navigating a life together gave way to a comfortable partnership, one built on mutual respect and deep affection. They found solace in each other, the scars of their past no longer a source of pain, but a testament to their resilience. Daniel often marveled at how his life had turned around, from the despair of living on the streets to the quiet contentment of family dinners. "I never thought I'd have this," he admitted one evening as they sat together on the porch, the setting sun casting a warm glow over their home. "I didn't think I deserved it." Amelia turned to him, her hand resting on his. "You deserve all of this and more," she said softly. "We all do. We've fought so hard to get here, and now we can finally enjoy it." Her words were more than just a comfort. They were a declaration of the life they had built together, a life that was theirs to shape. The sense of shared purpose that had brought them together during the trial now blossomed into something more profound. Their love, once rekindled through the fires of adversity, was now a steady flame, illuminating the path they walked together. The future that once seemed uncertain now stretched out before them, full of promise. There were still challenges to face: Lily's adjustment to school, the lingering effects of Daniel's past, but they faced them together, their bond growing stronger with each obstacle they overcame. Amelia found herself dreaming of what could be, a future where their family continued to thrive, each day bringing new joys and adventures. The love they shared, both for each other and for Lily, became the foundation upon which they built their new lives. As they stood together, looking out at the world from their small corner of it, Amelia felt a profound sense of peace. Their journey had been long and fraught with pain, but it had led them to this moment, a new beginning, born from the ashes of their past. They were an unexpected family, forged through trials and united by love. In the end, it wasn't the life Amelia had envisioned for herself, but it was one she wouldn't trade for anything. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel. Now, how about another one? To watch another nice story, just click on the video appearing on your screen.